Marcus Aurelius. How to stay motivated, even when you're completely unmotivated. When you wake up empty, what would Marcus Aurelius tell you? There's a kind of morning that doesn't start with sunlight. It begins with a silence that weighs on your chest. You open your eyes, not because you're ready, but because you have to. You sit on the edge of your bed, and the question isn't, what do I want to do today? But how am I supposed to do anything at all when I feel absolutely nothing inside? This is not laziness. This is not weakness. This is the weight of modern exhaustion. A battle no one sees. You're not alone. You're just tired of pretending that motivation is always a spark, when in truth, most days, it's a stone we push uphill with no applause and no immediate reward. And in this moment, right here, right now, the ancient voice of Marcus Aurelius enters, not with inspiration, but with clarity. What stands in the way becomes the way. He's not telling you to wait for motivation. He's asking why you believe you need it to begin. We've been trained by society to think that we must feel energized before we act, that enthusiasm is the prerequisite for greatness, that productivity begins with a rush of passion. But the Stoics knew the opposite. They lived through war, plague, betrayal, grief, and emptiness, and they still acted. Motivation is not a prerequisite for action. Action is the creator of motivation. Marcus Aurelius didn't rise each day as an emperor feeling excited. He often woke up dreading his duties. But he would remind himself, you were born to do this, not to lie in bed, not to escape, but to rise and live according to reason. Now pause. Breathe, because you need to hear this. You are not weak because you're unmotivated. You are human. But your power lies in what you choose to do next. Will you let the weight of apathy pin you down? Or will you rise slowly, without fireworks, without anyone watching, and move forward anyway? That silent decision to do what must be done, even without the energy to do it, that is where true motivation is born. Not from feelings, but from principles. Not from hype, but from honor. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations for the world to admire. He wrote them for himself, to remind his soul to keep walking through the fire, even when it made no sense. Because the Stoic path isn't about feeling better. It's about becoming stronger by confronting what is. You don't need a motivational speech. You need a mirror, a moment of stillness, a confrontation between your ideal self and the one who's ready to give up. Look at your life. What have you already survived? What storms have you endured without applause, without recognition, without help? You didn't give up then. Don't pretend you'll give up now. And if your mind argues, saying, but I don't feel ready, I don't feel strong, Marcus would say, then do it unready, do it tired, do it silently, but do it. He believed the soul becomes stronger each time it chooses duty over desire, purpose over pleasure, clarity over chaos. That's the ancient secret. You don't find strength, you generate it. Right now, while everything inside you wants to stop, you are being invited to awaken a deeper power. Not the shallow energy of a coffee-fueled morning, but the quiet, unshakable resilience of someone who does what needs to be done, regardless of how they feel. That is what Marcus Aurelius practiced every day. Not grand gestures, but relentless integrity. So what would he tell you today? He wouldn't comfort you. He would call you higher. He would point you toward your own soul and say, "You are capable of more than this." But only if you stop waiting to feel capable. Now, this isn't a call to hustle harder. It's not another voice demanding perfection. It's an invitation to walk slowly, deliberately, without performance, toward discipline, toward inner order, toward a life that doesn't need the world's approval to be meaningful. You don't need to want to move. You just need to move. The body will resist. The mind will argue. The feelings will betray you. But your values, your philosophy, your reason, they can lead. What if you lived today not based on emotion, but on principle? What if motivation was not the flame, but the ash that remains after you've acted with courage? You're not here to feel ready. You're here to become worthy of the life you were meant to live. The myth of spontaneous motivation. Modern culture has sold us a powerful lie that motivation is something you must wait for, that unless you feel it, that spark, that surge of energy, that clarity, you should not act. But this is not philosophy. This is seduction. This is the reason millions remain stagnant, hoping that one day they'll feel like it. Marcus Aurelius would have disagreed. Passion was not his compass. Duty was. And more importantly, he understood that waiting to feel right before doing what's right is the first step into chaos. Let's examine the trap. You wake up and you don't feel like moving. The modern voice says, "It's okay. Rest. Wait until you feel better." Then the hours pass. The guilt sets in. The self-image corrodes. You start believing you're lazy, when in truth, you've simply outsourced your will to your emotions. Stoicism offers a radical alternative. Act first. Feel later. Because feelings, by nature, are unstable. They shift with sleep, food, memory, hormones, noise, weather, and thought. If your life is built on that foundation, it will crumble. The Stoics taught that the wise build on reason, on principle, on what must be done, not what feels good in the moment. And here's the deeper truth. When you act without motivation, when you do the task while empty, something extraordinary happens. The very action begins to produce the energy you were waiting for. Not the false, temporary high of excitement, but the solid momentum of progress. The motivation myth suggests that we must always be inspired to begin. But in reality, inspiration is most often the result of beginning. Marcus Aurelius didn't wait to feel like a philosopher to write meditations. He wrote in secret, often in pain, often in solitude. He said, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, 'I am rising to do the work of a human being.'" He was reminding himself that motivation was irrelevant. Purpose was not. This shift in mindset is crucial. Modern self-help often whispers, "Trust your feelings. They are your compass." But ancient wisdom answers, "Train your feelings to follow your compass." And your compass is not pleasure, nor comfort, nor mood. It is the reason you exist, your role, your strength, your daily discipline. You must unlearn the belief that action requires a feeling. It is not cowardice to move without enthusiasm. It is courage. It is mastery. Because when you stand up on the days you feel most broken, you are practicing the highest form of power, sovereignty over the self. The greatest warriors in history did not fight because they were in the mood. They fought because the moment required it. Marcus Aurelius was surrounded by death, betrayal, and fatigue. Yet he never said, "I will act when I feel better." He acted and then felt better because he had acted. You may be wondering, if I do this without motivation, won't it feel fake? Won't it lack passion? No, it will feel pure, because there is something more sacred than excitement, and that is integrity. To do the right thing when your body is weak, your mind is heavy, and your heart is silent. That is the Stoic path. It's not glamorous. It's not shared on social media, but it is transformative. The world waits for inspiration. The Stoic creates it, with discipline, with movement, with quiet acts of courage no one sees. So the next time you feel nothing, and your mind says, "Not now," remember, waiting won't bring it. Doing will. Action is the spark. Discipline is the match. And the fire you light today by refusing to obey your feelings may be the fire that guides someone else tomorrow. You are not here to wait. You are here to choose. The emotional discipline of an emperor. You don't control when the storm hits, but you can control how deeply it shakes you. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire on the edge of collapse, surrounded by death, deceit, betrayal, and pressure from every side. Yet he never let the outer chaos become inner disorder. That was not an accident. It was training. It was choice. It was emotional discipline. We live in an age obsessed with feelings. We monitor our emotions as if they're sacred. We overanalyze our moods, our highs, our lows, our triggers. The modern world teaches that your feelings are facts, that if you're angry, it must be because something is wrong, that if you're anxious, it must be because you're not safe, that if you're unmotivated, it must mean you should stop. But what if that's not true? What if your feelings aren't always reflections of reality, but simply noise, data without meaning unless you assign it? This is where Stoicism disrupts modern psychology, not by denying emotion, but by dethroning it. Marcus Aurelius didn't pretend he felt nothing. He just refused to let those feelings rule his reason. He wrote things like, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's not detachment. That's training. He was training his mind to see emotion as a signal, not a command. When fear rose, he acknowledged it, then asked, "What is this fear made of? What am I really afraid of? Can this fear touch my character, my choices, my soul?" When anger threatened to explode, he dissected it. What is making me angry? Is it ignorance in another person? Is it my ego being wounded? If I lose control, who am I really serving? He separated the trigger from the response. He refused to be a slave to impulse. That is emotional discipline. And in your own life, this is where transformation begins. Not in suppressing emotions, but in questioning them, interrogating them, deciding which ones deserve your energy and which are simply passing clouds in a noisy sky. You wake up anxious, fine. But does that mean you stop moving? You feel sadness, okay. But does that mean you lose your clarity? You're unmotivated, naturally. But is your mission over because of it? No, because your emotions don't get to drive. Your philosophy does. That's the Stoic framework. You build a system of principles, and then you obey that system, especially when your emotions beg you not to. Imagine if your emotional state was just background music, and your actions were guided by a code. a higher self, a voice that says, "This is who I am, regardless of how I feel today." Marcus Aurelius faced devastating loss of friends, of children, of comrades. Yet he returned to the page, to his reason, to his practice. He reminded himself that pain is a part of life, not a signal to collapse. That emotions are waves, but you are the shore, solid, grounded, still. The modern world rewards emotional reactions, clicks, outrage, drama. But Stoicism offers something rarer, inner peace in a world addicted to noise. You become dangerous the moment you no longer need your emotions to validate your actions, because then you are free. You can work while afraid. You can speak while uncertain. You can love while hurting. You can rise while empty. Emotional discipline is not coldness. It's strength wrapped in awareness. It's choosing how to respond rather than reacting without thought. It's looking at your own storm and saying, "I see you, but I will not bow." And this is not just a concept. It's a practice. Each day is a training ground. You get angry, pause and examine. You feel envy, trace its roots. You feel despair. Ask yourself, is this true or just a passing shadow? The more you do this, the more your emotions become advisors, not rulers. They inform, but they don't command. Marcus Aurelius taught us that true mastery begins within. Before you conquer a kingdom, you must conquer your reactions. Before you lead others, you must lead yourself. So begin here. Next time you feel overwhelmed, pause. Ask, is this emotion useful? Is it helping me live according to my values? If not, let it pass like clouds over the mind. Discipline is not rigid. It is the path back to yourself. The emperor within you is waiting to rise. Not when the world calms down, but when you decide to lead yourself through the storm. The void of now. How Stoicism faces stagnation. There's a specific kind of suffering that isn't loud. It doesn't come from tragedy or betrayal. It comes from stillness, from the feeling that nothing is moving forward, that you're doing everything right, showing up, staying disciplined, enduring, but the progress is invisible. You look around and life feels like a pause screen. No applause, no breakthrough, no reward. This is stagnation, a silent crisis. And it's more dangerous than chaos because it whispers, "Why keep going?" Most people quit not during pain, but during this quiet, when nothing seems to be happening. That's when doubt grows. That's when voices creep in. Maybe I'm not enough. Maybe this is pointless. Maybe I should just stop. But Marcus Aurelius faced this same silence, and his answer wasn't comfort. It was clarity. He wrote, "Don't be ashamed of needing help. You have a duty to fulfill just like a soldier on the wall. So what if you're injured and can't climb up without another soldier's help?" In other words, even when nothing outside you changes, what matters is that you continue your post. You hold your position. You keep your duty. Because that, not results, defines who you are. Stagnation isn't a sign of failure. It's a test of philosophy. Anyone can act when the results are fast, but the Stoic acts because it is right, not because it is recognized. And here's the twist. What looks like stagnation on the surface is often transformation underground. A tree doesn't grow new branches every day. Sometimes it's strengthening its roots, deepening its foundation, quietly preparing for the next season. Your inner life works the same way. You don't always feel progress because growth doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Stoicism teaches us to detach from outcomes, not because they don't matter, but because they are not ours to control. Your job is to act in accordance with virtue, to align your day with your principles, to do what must be done, especially when no one is watching, not even you. That's the paradox. The more you demand visible progress, the less you feel it. The more you let go of control and focus on right action, the more progress builds, invisibly, faithfully. Ask yourself, are you stagnant or are you simply quiet? Are you failing or are you in a sacred pause, a recalibration, a strengthening? Marcus Aurelius never claimed that life would always feel meaningful. He simply believed that meaning could be chosen, even in the absence of feeling. When you feel stuck, that's your cue to go deeper, not wider, to refine your principles, to clean your inner temple, to reconnect with your why, not your when. This is how the Stoic survives the void, not by denying it, not by escaping it, but by standing still in it with courage. He asks, what does this moment require of me? The ego wants motion, the spirit wants meaning, and meaning often arrives in the stillness between the steps, in the empty space where you either break or build. Most people run from that silence, but you can enter it and lead yourself through it. Not because you know what's coming next, but because you refuse to betray the discipline you planted before the silence began. That's the test. That's the training. That's the way. So if today feels stuck, still, slow, good, you're in the sacred ground of self-mastery. Stay there. Stand tall. Strengthen the roots. Because what you become in this stillness will carry you when the next storm comes. Overcoming crises with cold focus. When crisis strikes, most people search for a way out. The Stoic searches for a way through. Not by force, not by panic, but by clarity. A cold, steady focus that cuts through the noise and reveals what truly matters. Marcus Aurelius lived surrounded by crisis. Plague swept his empire. Wars consumed his borders. Friends betrayed him. Family disappointed him. And yet, he governed. He wrote. He endured. Not because he was immune to pain, but because he had trained his mind to function under pressure. He did not resist reality. He dissected it. His journals show a man who didn't ask, why is this happening to me? But rather, what will I choose to be in the face of this? This is the shift. This is the difference. The ordinary mind collapses when the external world becomes unstable. The Stoic mind sees crisis as a forge, a place where character is hammered, shaped, refined. When crisis hits, illness, betrayal, financial ruin, heartbreak, the untrained mind scrambles for escape. But the disciplined mind does something rarer. It pauses, centers, and focuses, not on what it cannot change, but on what it can. And this is the first Stoic principle in crisis. Control your response. That is your only true power. You cannot undo the event, but you can decide what it means. You can decide whether you will be defined by it or forged through it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Cold focus is not emotional suppression. It's emotional precision. It's the ability to feel deeply without becoming lost in feeling. To say, yes, this hurts. Yes, this is real. But no, it does not own me. And from that place, you ask powerful questions. What is within my control right now? What is the next right action? What principle must I not abandon? Because this is the real danger of crisis, not the event itself, but the risk of forgetting who you are. Crises don't break people. Compromise does. Panic does. Abandoning one's values for short-term relief, that's what creates ruin. So the Stoic holds, not blindly, not arrogantly, but with discipline. You're not expected to have every answer. You're expected to be rooted while you search. You are not failing if you feel fear. You are failing only if you let fear dictate your next step. Marcus didn't wait for rescue. He became his own anchor. When others around him lost their minds, he kept writing, kept thinking, kept choosing. And you can do the same. Crisis is a fire, yes, but it's also a mirror. It reveals what is solid and what was only illusion. Cold focus is not detachment from reality. It's full presence in reality, without surrender to despair. You ask, what must I do next? Even if the world burns around you, there is always one small, honorable, rational act you can take. It might be reaching out. It might be breathing deeply. It might be choosing silence instead of retaliation. It might be protecting your mind from panic. It might be protecting someone else with calm. These small acts are not insignificant. They are the foundation of a life that survives collapse. In modern chaos, crisis is almost constant, but so is the opportunity to embody your values under pressure. This is where philosophy is no longer theory, but lifeline. Cold focus doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you feel, but you lead anyway. This is the path of Marcus Aurelius, the path of the one who continues, not because the world is safe, but because the soul is aligned. So if you're facing crisis now, return to the center. Strip away the noise. Ask, who do I want to be in this moment? And then become it. When the inner voice says, give up, it doesn't scream, it whispers. And that's what makes it so dangerous. You can recognize external enemies. You can defend yourself from attacks outside. But what happens when the voice telling you to quit is your own? You wake up tired. You go through the day without clarity. You try to push forward, but something deep inside begins to murmur. What's the point? That voice doesn't rage. It seeps, quiet, persistent, seductive. And if you're not vigilant, it becomes the dominant narrative in your life. Marcus Aurelius knew that battle. The true Stoic doesn't fight the world first. He fights the voice inside, the one that says, you've tried long enough. Let it go. Take the easier road. But that voice is not you. It's your exhaustion. It's your fear. It's your disappointment, dressed as reason. The Stoic doesn't silence that voice by pretending it doesn't exist. He sits with it. He listens, and then he examines. What are you really? He asks. Are you warning me of danger or tempting me with comfort? Are you guiding me toward peace or luring me into resignation? That self-dialogue is where the real war happens. Not in loud moments of decision, but in quiet hours of doubt. In late nights when no one sees your effort. In early mornings when your soul hasn't caught up with your body. That's when it rises. The voice that says, "Stop trying." But Marcus Aurelius would answer, "Don't waste what remains of your life in doubt. Act now, as nature intended, and speak no more of what must be done. Become it." He refused to negotiate with apathy. He saw every temptation to quit as an opportunity to become stronger in will. And so must you. That voice, that seductive despair, it grows louder the longer you entertain it. Every time you repeat its message, you give it power. Every time you speak your fatigue without countering it with reason, you reinforce its authority. But the Stoic knows the way out. He doesn't try to kill the voice. He speaks over it with principle. When it says, "I'm tired," he says, "and yet I move." When it says, "This is useless," he says, "then let it be. I still choose to do it." When it says, "Nobody sees you," he says, "That is not why I act." He reclaims the narrative, not by emotion, but by truth. You cannot wait for the inner voice to change. You must change what you reply. The voice that says give up is not the enemy. It is the test, the gate, the proving ground. If you never hear it, you've never pushed yourself to the edge where transformation happens. And when you hear it, you must remember, every great soul has battled this whisper. The difference between those who rise and those who fall is not who hears it, but who obeys it. There are moments when the most powerful thing you can do is one small act of rebellion against that voice. Stand up, wash your face, open the book, write the line, send the message, lift the weight, speak the word, take the breath. That is Stoicism. The refusal to let weakness become identity. The modern world tells you to protect your energy. Stoicism tells you to command it, not recklessly, not to destroy yourself, but to lead yourself even when you're tired, especially when you're tired, because that's when your character is no longer theory. It becomes real. The inner voice may never disappear, but it will get quieter as you act in opposition to it. As you prove to yourself that you are not your thoughts, you are not your doubt, you are not your fear, you are your decisions. And that decision, to continue without applause, without results, without motivation, is the highest form of self-respect. The inner voice says give up. You say, not today. The philosophy of consistency. Greatness is not born in moments of brilliance. It is carved in the routine silence of discipline. The world celebrates those who shine, the innovators, the speakers, the risk-takers. But Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, understood something far deeper. The real strength is not found in intensity, but in consistency. And this truth unsettles the modern mind, trained to crave progress, applause, and visible results. Consistency feels small, repetitive, boring. But that's because we've forgotten that repetition is not redundancy. Repetition is refinement. It is the slow, deliberate mastery of the self. Marcus wrote not because it was exciting, but because it was necessary. Every day, he returned to his inner world. He questioned his motives. He recentered his focus. He sharpened his soul. And he did it without waiting for the mood to strike. Consistency, to a Stoic, is not a strategy. It's an identity. You don't show up because the conditions are perfect. You show up because you've decided who you are. Modern motivation fluctuates with mood. Stoic consistency is rooted in principle. You don't brush your teeth only when you feel inspired. You don't eat only when you feel a breakthrough is coming. So why should you only pursue your purpose when you're in the zone? Discipline is showing up when you're bored, when you're tired, when the voice of doubt is louder than the voice of clarity. That's where the real battle is won. Consistency doesn't mean doing everything. It means doing what matters, over and over, until the doing becomes part of your nature. Because when the storm comes, when your emotions betray you, and the path disappears under your feet, it's not talent or brilliance that will save you. It's the structure you've already built. It's your rituals, your values, your standards. It's the fact that while others question if they should start, you're already moving. Consistency is the immune system of the soul. It protects you from collapse, from distraction, from compromise. And here's the paradox. The most resilient people in the world are not the ones who always feel strong. They are the ones who do what is necessary, even when they feel weak. There's no secret to consistency. There's no shortcut. But there is a path, and it begins with a simple question. What am I committed to, regardless of how I feel? Not what excites you, not what looks good online. What have you chosen to carry? And how often do you put that choice into action? Consistency is uncomfortable because it confronts your excuses. It removes the romance from growth and replaces it with responsibility. And yet, this is the door. The door to transformation is not grand. It's daily. It creaks. It's weathered. But it opens every morning to those who dare to walk through it again. Marcus Aurelius didn't ask to be extraordinary. He asked to be aligned. He didn't chase constant evolution. He embraced continuous return to values, to reason, to purpose. You want to change your life? Don't seek intensity. Seek rhythm. Don't seek fire. Seek foundation. Wake up. Begin again. Repeat. Not because it's easy, not because it's exciting, but because it's right. And one day, without noticing, you'll look up and realize your life is the result of everything you kept doing after the emotion was gone. That is Stoicism in practice. Not in the moment of inspiration, but in the morning when you don't feel like it. Not in the achievement, but in the habit that made it inevitable. This is not about being rigid. It's about being real. Are you consistent with your excuses or with your mission? Consistency is not perfection. It's presence, daily, quiet, unseen presence. And over time, it becomes power. The body is tired, but the soul stands firm. There are days when your limbs feel heavy, when your breath feels thin, when your mind drags itself through fog. No energy, no drive, no clarity. Just exhaustion, the full weight of living pressing against your chest. And yet, you're still here. That moment, when the body cries for rest, but the soul refuses to collapse, is sacred. It is where the ordinary man stops and the Stoic awakens. Marcus Aurelius knew this state well. He wasn't a warrior on the battlefield of theory. He was a man consumed by duty, grief, sickness, and fatigue. He didn't have the luxury of waiting to feel restored before leading an empire. He had to rise while burdened, lead while broken, think while weary, and so do you. There's a difference between rest and surrender. Rest is wise, but surrender to fatigue, when your purpose still calls, is something else. It is slow erosion disguised as self-care. The Stoic doesn't deny the pain of the body. He respects it, but he never lets it dictate the direction of his soul. Aurelius wrote, "Is your body drawn by nature to movement? Then move, but move with reason. If it's time to rest, rest. But if your mind is still strong, don't betray it just because your body is aching." This is the art of endurance, to discern when to stop and when to stand firm. Pain is not always a warning. Sometimes it's a test, a messenger, a sharpening edge. When your muscles ache, when your head is pounding, when your spirit feels drained, the question is not, can I push through? But rather, who am I becoming in the way I respond to this moment? Most people collapse when the body collapses. But the Stoic separates the two. The flesh is tired, yes. But is the will still alive? Can you still breathe, think, choose? Then you are not defeated. Because here lies the truth. The soul is deeper than the body. The will is stronger than the muscle. The clarity of purpose can outlast physical strength. You may need rest, take it. But don't let the fatigue write your story. The modern world worships productivity, but ignores endurance. But Stoicism doesn't care about performance. It cares about presence, about showing up fully, even if you're limping. You're not expected to run, but can you take one more step? Can you speak one more word of truth? Can you hold one more second of silence instead of complaint? That is Stoic strength. The body will always weaken. That's part of being human. The question is, when it does, do you descend with it, or do you remain upright within? Even when Marcus Aurelius was ill, even when he could barely sleep, he wrote, not because he wanted to produce, but because he had decided to remain aligned, even while his body betrayed him. You must choose that same inner alignment. Ask yourself, what do I serve that is bigger than my comfort? Because when you're driven only by how you feel, your destiny is limited to your energy. But when you're driven by your code, by your character, by your higher self, then even in weakness, you walk in strength. The body may shake, the emotions may fluctuate, but the soul, if trained, can stand unmoved. And in that stillness, in that exhaustion, in that moment when no one else sees, something sacred is built. Resilience, depth, honor. You become the kind of person who doesn't need ideal conditions to keep walking. You walk because it is who you are. Tired but true. Weak but unwavering. Heavy but honest. And as the body recovers, and it will, your soul remains firm. Because you did not let the fatigue define your values. This is not heroism. It is integrity. This is not toxic endurance. It is sacred alignment. The body will rest. But your mission, your calling, your character, those cannot sleep. So let the body falter. Let the flesh cry. But let the soul rise. And that rising is what makes you unbreakable. The Stoic art of starting over. Every day, the calendar flips. The clock resets. The sun rises again. But what truly renews your life is not time. It's decision. Most people wait for a new year, a new week, a new season to start over. But Marcus Aurelius understood something deeper. Every day is a battlefield, and each dawn is a chance to return to yourself. He didn't romanticize change. He made it ritual. He wrote, "Each day provides its own gifts. Do not let the sun rise without claiming them." And in those words, he was training himself, reminding his weary, burdened, human self that starting over is not a dramatic event. It is a disciplined return. Return to reason. Return to clarity. Return to the inner compass that doesn't shift with mood or noise. To the Stoic, the power is not in how perfectly you begin, but that you begin again, even after failure, especially after failure. There's no shame in collapsing. There is shame in never rising again. The modern world teaches perfection or nothing. You're either on track or off track. You either win or you failed. But Stoicism teaches a subtler, more resilient path. Begin again. Even if you fell yesterday, even if you fell an hour ago, even if you're still on your knees, there is no permanent defeat unless you refuse to stand. This is the art of re-entry, the invisible mastery of starting over, not once, but daily, hourly, as often as required. You begin again not because you forgot the path, but because the path is always moving beneath your feet. Life changes. Circumstances evolve, but your commitment to virtue, to discipline, to integrity, to self-command must remain. The Stoic doesn't wait for a perfect morning. He builds one. He doesn't wait to feel ready. He chooses readiness in the face of resistance, and each morning becomes sacred, not because it is magical, but because it is chosen. Owned, declared. That is why Marcus wrote. That is why he repeated himself. Why his pages say the same things over and over in different ways. He wasn't confused. He was committed. He knew that repetition is remembrance, that the soul forgets, that the mind wanders, that even the strongest of us drift from our values without constant return. So he carved his values in ink. You must carve them in action. Every day, every start. Even when it feels small. Especially when it feels small. You want change? Forget drama. Forget reinvention. Forget the illusion of sudden breakthroughs. Become someone who can begin again every morning, without complaint, without shame, without delay. You fell off your routine? Begin again. You lost your temper? Begin again. You wasted the last hour? Begin again. This is not weakness. This is strength disguised as humility. The ego hates starting over. It wants a clean record, a perfect streak. But the soul knows that transformation lives in repetition, not reputation. And here's the truth. If you begin again enough times, the start becomes the habit. The return becomes the rhythm. The discipline becomes your identity. You stop needing motivation because your life becomes momentum. But it begins, always, with a choice. Right now, you can wait until next week. You can spiral in guilt. Or you can remember, Marcus Aurelius ruled the world and still had to remind himself every single day to return, to rise, to act, to be. That same invitation is in front of you now. Not to be perfect, but to begin again. Motivation is a silent emperor within you. It doesn't shout. It doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't arrive with fireworks, nor does it knock on your door with perfect timing. True motivation walks like an emperor, silent, composed, constant. And it lives inside you, waiting not to inspire you, but to lead you. This is the final lesson of Marcus Aurelius. Motivation is not a feeling you chase. It is a standard you embody, a posture, a choice, a way of walking through the world when nothing outside makes sense, but everything inside remains aligned. You've been taught that motivation is a surge, that it must be felt before you act. But Marcus never waited for mood. He waited for clarity. And when clarity came, he moved, even while tired, even while afraid, even while burdened with the weight of an empire he did not ask for. Because he understood what we so often forget, you do not need to feel inspired to act with purpose. You are not your fear. You are not your fatigue. You are not your temporary lack of enthusiasm. You are the soul behind all of it. You are the awareness that sees, the reason that chooses, the will that acts. And in that awareness lies a power greater than any motivational video, any fleeting emotion, any external reward. You are your own momentum. You are your own reason. And the moment you stop looking outside yourself for the push and start looking inward for the anchor, everything changes. The world will offer excuses, distractions, comforts, even justifications for giving up. But the Stoic looks inward and asks, what is mine to do today? Not tomorrow, not next year, today, this moment. And if the body is tired, the Stoic adjusts, but does not retreat. If the progress is slow, the Stoic continues, but does not complain. If the emotion is absent, the Stoic acts anyway, because reason is stronger than impulse. Marcus Aurelius did not ask to be great. He asked to be steady. He didn't want applause. He wanted alignment. And you, too, are capable of this quiet greatness, not because life is easy, but because your character is forged through difficulty. You've walked through exhaustion. You've carried invisible burdens. You've stood in silence when everything inside was crumbling. That is not failure. That is strength. You don't need to prove your worth through productivity. You prove it through presence, through returning, rising, recommitting, again, in it again, even when no one sees. This is how motivation is reborn, not through hype, but through quiet decision, not through inspiration, but through integrity. So today, right now, don't wait for your moment. Make it. Don't wait for permission to begin. Begin. You don't need to feel like an emperor to act like one. You only need to do what Marcus Aurelius did. Remember who you are. Reject what does not serve your soul. And lead, not loudly, but steadily, with honor, discipline, and a commitment to the path, even when no one is watching. Because the Stoic's greatest strength is not perfection. It is persistence. And the silent emperor within you? He's ready.